Welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by Insurance Brokers Alliance. Newsroom, of course, is where our panel discusses news from far and wide. Tonight we're starting with local. On the panel tonight, welcome back Carolyn Dean.
Thanks, Bill.
Always nice to have you here.
Always nice to be here.
And alongside Tom Conroy, who you're used to seeing as well.
Hello, Bill. And I have to say, I'm very impressed. Carolyn's put a school exercise book.
She is.
And she's handwriting with a pen.
Extremely organised. Tom forgot to bring his.
I go electronic. So.
We'll be talking to him about that after the show. Now, Rugby Park, Tom, this is your one, your call on this one here. Council's gone with it. There are only 8 councillors present at the meeting.
They should have had the meeting at the hospital.
Well,
you had more people voting, wouldn't you? Right.
Exactly, 8 councillors.
Actually, that will bring an issue later we could perhaps discuss, is that it might be time for some of the older gentlemen who have put in good service at looking after their health. They can't be out in the community and they can't be at the meetings. They've got to perhaps look at maybe it's in their twilight. Thank you for the service. It might be time to step aside, but because it is a concern when you get a major event like that, and there was already people stepping out because of conflicts of interest, and you didn't have anything like a full quorum of vote, and on a major issue that would.
So we had out of how many councillors are there? 12 councillors, Carolyn,
and the mayor.
Well, no, let's just say was it 12 plus the mayor? Okay, so out of 12 councillors, we only had 4.
8. They had 8 voting.
We had 8 voting. We only had 4 councillors out of 12 who actually, when it came down to it, who voted for it in the chamber. Now I know
correct, or against.
That's right. Yeah, and the others, the 4 who are away, may have been equally divided. I don't know. Could have
swayed it one way or the other dramatically. You don't know, do you? But the end result is we've got the right result in that I think the council...
Well, according to you.
No, I'll explain myself. The council owns the ground. Like that leaves only Eden Park out of every rugby ground in New Zealand, major rugby ground, not owned by the council, that's owned by the Eden Board, Trust, whatever. And they still regret to this day not building a covered stadium on the wharf when they had the opportunity. Yeah, right. So from a completely logical, that's what everyone else does because it's practical. They've taken over the facility. The process to get there is very convoluted, and we couldn't. Let's spend the entire show explaining it because it goes back to 2000. We're talking about 15 years of negotiations and loans going from one place to the other, and borrowings and paying back and management fees, and it's extraordinarily complicated. And it can't be simplified in a couple of sentences in the media that they're paying $400,000. I think you really, if you're really interested to dig deep and go back over the history, if you really want to. But I think my perception is that the council wanted a quick solution. If we're going to take over, let's make it a clean cut, clean the debt, let's start from scratch and run it from here on in. And that was possibly the most expedient method. But I understand everyone's point of view. This community trust says, well, if we waived if we'd flagged the loan, then other people would lend money to would come to us and say, how come you flagged their loan and we had to pay ours back? And so they've got their issue, and then the trust that runs the park have to try and get the book straight, and the council doesn't want to spend councillors' money. So it's a very complicated series of events that has led to the solution. But I think in terms of expediency and getting on with the business and now moving forward as to running the park properly, as best as possible. Never profitably. I think that's the most, that's probably the best result. Definitely the best result. Yeah. And I'm not concerned one iota about the $295,000 of running costs, because that's a drop in the ocean compared with running the pool and the library and all the other facilities, which we pay for. That's what we do as ratepayers. I can't swim, but I don't mind paying something towards the pool. So I don't think that's an extraordinary amount of money to put towards the stadium. But the initial thrust was always to get it as a multi-purpose stadium, and that's never actually happened partly because of our climate. It's really hard to get promoters and people to hold events here outdoor in Invercargill. Whether the weather's good or not, the perception is difficult. It is a rugby venue. That's what we've just got to live with and make the best of it. Rugby brings the biggest crowds in, and I know I'm a rugby person, but I'm saying just pragmatically, they bring the biggest crowds consistently to anything in Invercargill. They have to have somewhere to play it. But I'll say more on that later. Carolyn's got to have. If you'd
been still on the council, which way would you have voted, or can't you?
That's a good question.
Well, I think the problem with being in that situation is that, first of all, it's incredibly frustrating, and I've said it on the show before. Being a councillor, sitting on a table where you've got X amount of funding that you can dish out, and having an entity come along and saying, "Can you give us a whole lot of money because we're falling over?" And the problem with the rugby situation is that although it's good for Invercargill and everyone can see that, it's no longer part of the Local Government Act to do those kinds of things. When I came onto council, we had social, environmental, infrastructure, the 4 well-beings, and we could do pretty much anything we wanted under those 4 well-beings. We could say, well, this is for that well-being and this is for that. So we had kind of carte blanche across everything. And now the Local Government Act has changed, so it's really about infrastructure and services.
Basic stuff.
Yeah, really basic. So it's quite hard to justify dishing out a lot of money to something that's a sport, which doesn't come under public services in infrastructure.
But a park is a public service, isn't it? That's what it is. It's a park. It's a physical park.
A greenway park, yes, but a sports park.
You can walk through there any time you like.
Yeah. So anyway,
match day,
those kind of things are extremely frustrating when you are being asked to deliberate on something like that. But then once you get past that, you do have to deliberate on what's put in front of you. And so the next thing is you get this report come up and it's got 3 options. And some of those options are completely, you can't do them. Untenable. So that one's out, and there's really only one option left. But the problem is that there could have been other options. But the report that came forward to you, because there's 12 with 13 people usually trying to make this decision, you've got to focus them. But then you cut out all those decisions, all the options of out-of-the-box thinking. So I think there could have been other options.
I think there were plenty of it. There was a lot of options explored, wasn't there, over 15 years? There's been we've been through a few machinations. I don't think it was just clear-cut, just one.
But I think the 3 that came forward were carry on as we do, and rugby goes down the tubes. Well, that's not good. Take over, or whatever option 3 was, probably wasn't tenable either. So I find those situations equally as frustrating because you are already in momentum then, like let's look at these options and let's decide. But there's a step before that, which, and I know what you're saying, and maybe there were other options over the time, but the ones that come forward in that report are quite limiting. So, but I don't know how I would have voted on that one because I didn't hear the submissions.
Right.
So
The big question to me was, is there any other way we could maintain that facility, but more or less in the middle of town, without the thing deteriorating and becoming unavailable for rugby or for anybody else? There's been other shows there too. Was there any other way of keeping the thing available so that it was in reasonable condition, looked after, and still a community asset? And to me, the answer to that question was there was no other way. The council had to buy it. I actually don't think it was really a question in the end. It was a question of who bought it, whether the community trust could actually take it over. But as you said, Tom, they can't do that. They can't go forgiving loans like that because somebody else is going to come along and do it. And at the end of the day, I think Tim actually made... I actually appreciated Tim's statement. He made the casting vote, Mayor Tim. He said he was sickened by the situation, which was not the council's doing. And but we had to. They just had to go ahead and do it because there was no other choice really. The council was left sort of holding the baby. It is
that feeling, that kind of heavy stomach. Oh, this is the last thing we need to be.
We didn't want this problem. We've got to solve it.
There is a kind of an element there for expediency. It is often the best thing for council just to step in.
Yeah.
But then hopefully provide and implement some innovative thinking to it that will help to meet all our other community goals, like a vibrant city centre and like events that we can go to and enjoy ourselves and have fun and connect with other people. Like there are all those things that particular facility could help to meet our needs as a community with. So,
but you talk about the vibrant city. Well, they spend $400,000 to get the park, and then $200,000 every year to maintain it. $300,000. It's going to take a long time to recoup the money we're going to spend in dressing up East Street.
Oh yes.
And then you've got to say which of the two is the most beneficial for the town. So I think for the amount of money, which is relatively small, it's relatively small in the scale of things.
But it's like 1.2 million in total.
Yeah, but made up of little bits and pieces. But that's still, it's $30 million to tidy up the middle of town, isn't it? So it's a 30th of something, and I would suspect in terms of actual commercial return, the park probably will pay its way, investment versus return.
Yep.
So, the amount of money didn't faze me at all. I know it's easy to say that because it's not all my money, but I think as a pragmatic solution, there were, as you say, very few choices.
The council has the facilities to do it too.
That's right.
They know how to mow grass. and they know how to maintain, you know, all the gear that's there. They're doing it in other places.
We always stand the risk in this community in particular, where we pour money through trusts into building all these things in order to make the city bigger, that there's going to be an ongoing pain that goes with those things if we don't use them, if we don't fully utilise them, and there's always going to be a latent cost to maintain them because we just don't have the population base to make them pay their own way. That's just not going to happen.
What do you think, Tom, about the question of the other councils in the region putting money into a sort of centralised facility like that's in Invercargill?
I think they absolutely should.
You do?
And the stadium and the pool. Anything that people come to town to enjoy. And maybe not the pools so much because, for instance, they've got their own pools. That might be a stretch. But in terms of that is the Southland football ground. This is the Southland Stadium, where we bring events for all the benefit of Southlanders. I think that's where they've got a duty to make a contribution. I know getting a contribution out of them is very difficult because it's not in their backyard.
Well, they have got an opportunity not to, haven't they?
Yep.
You know, we can't force it. So
I will go back to the stadium in Dunedin, which costs the Dunedin people $67 a year to pay for, and the people in Cromwell $40.
Oh,
That doesn't seem extravagant to me. A stadium that pulls in 17,000, 1/5 of your population into one day event, and then your Rod Stewart, and then you got your Neil Diamonds and everything. Tell me that's not a good spend of your money.
But the biggest issue there is that those ratepayer bases are so small, and the infrastructure, like in the Southland District, you've got the biggest roading network in the country, and you've got a small ratepayer base to try to afford everything from. So that's your priority. And those add-on things, I think, are very difficult for them to stretch to. And also, we have a lot of funding. Like, we've got the ILT that puts in the capital for a lot of those things to be built. And then, so that sort of means that more things are built to a high standard and we've got more facilities, which then becomes very hard for small communities to sustain.
But so, okay, we'll let you off paying, but you're not allowed to come to them. Is that a solution?
They do pay to come to them. It would be good if we had some kind of ticket whereby ICC ratepayers had a card where they would pay these because they've already paid in their rates. And that is actually a solution that
not a bad idea.
work.
How come that's never been talked about?
Yeah.
We
need younger people on council.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. You may have to come back, Carolyn. But I think that sounds like sensible thinking is to have, okay, there is a compromise, is so that, you know, those who pay for it pay less later on.
Moving to the other end of the country and still talking about funding things, well, you know, the casino thing's been in the news lately, everybody's heard about it, but it boiled down the end to the fact that there was a rumour, of course, the casino were going to say, oh, we've suddenly discovered, yeah, right, we need another 140 million, and the Prime Minister wasn't saying no, you know, oh, well, we might be able to come up with that, and a few other people started saying, here, hang on a minute, this was supposed to be a deal whereby Auckland got the convention centre and you got extra pokies and extra gambling tables, a big outcry. Of course, now what we're presented with is a casino which is now being profit up as a smaller unit, and there will be no extra spend because the casino themselves made it quite clear they weren't interested in putting any more money into it. And so the scenario's gone on for several weeks, as you are aware, but my question is this. Okay, if they're going to produce a smaller convention centre, should the licence to have those extra gambling machines and extra gambling tables be reviewed as well? Because to me, the whole thing looks like a manipulation. You know, it was all very close to the agreement time in 2013, was it, or whenever it was anyway. And all of a sudden, oh, there's overruns, there's this, there's that. It seemed very quick to me. And I believe that the whole thing, I don't like gambling machines and I don't like casino tables anyway, so I'm coming from a biased point of view, but if they're saying, oh, it's going to be smaller, call them back in. Sorry, slash a few off. What do you reckon?
Well, what would be the benefit of that? You think that would reduce gambling?
I don't know if it would reduce gambling, would reduce the opportunity to gamble, because obviously if they were asking for more in the first place, they must have thought we'll get more return off them. There's obviously a formula there that when so many machines are occupied, people won't come, that kind of thing. You know, it operates in all sorts of institutions like that. You always have a few free ones there, so people can wander around, go from this one to that one.
Yeah, I think the idea is probably sound that if you reduce the amount of machines or opportunities, then there'll be less gambling, but I don't know if the reality would be that would do anything. If people have an addiction, then it's going to squeeze out somewhere.
Having said that, though, they did say that they were going to produce a certain size convention centre for that. It's a trade-off, it's like anything. So if they've cut down their part, shouldn't the government cut down what they're offering? I know it's been passed in legislation, but...
Well, I think you should have the biggest centre with as many gaming machines and tables as you like.
You're not against them, Tom?
I'm absolutely for them. I think it's a fantastic revenue spinner for Auckland. I think it's great to have international standard facilities. We're promoting it as our biggest city. Most of the money coming in is, well, a lot of it is, say, either migrant or visitors.
So we're sort of
is that well established, though? Because they say it's going to be, but it turned out when they surveyed the Queenstown one a few years ago that most of it was coming from locals.
Well, Queenstown's not Auckland, and if you've been to the Auckland casino, as I have popped in occasionally,
I've been there.
You can see that who funds most of the turnover.
Well, this is first-hand knowledge.
But this is an international through centre where people are visiting, and I think Auckland needs to have facilities to cater for those visitors and migrants who want to use the facilities, and the tax money goes back into the community. If you've got a gambling problem, that's your bad luck. It's no different from going down and putting the money in South Canterbury Finance, and they lost a hell of a lot more money than the people do at the casino. So you've got to look at it, say, we're not mothering people. Yeah. If that's a good way of generating money. The convention centre and its design was fabulous. It looked like there was theatres in there. People focus on the casino machines and the gambling machines, but they had theatres and performance areas. And if you've ever tried to hire a venue in Auckland for a show, as we have done, often there's clashes, you can't get one. So the more of those different sizes of venues being available, right in the middle of town, that was a great idea.
Is this the reason the government pushed the whole thing through? So they were so keen on it because they knew that hole was there.
Well, I think they saw it as a great concept for Auckland. What they're arguing about is how big and who pays the final bill.
That's right.
I'd hate to see it compromised in terms of a quality hosting venue because we've argued over a few machines or who pays for $100,000 for this or that or the other. But at the end of the day, the conference centre people have to determine how much budget they can put towards it, and I hope they keep a lot of the other facilities. The danger is they take out the machines and the gambling tables and they they leave those in and they leave off some of the nice theatres and performance venues, part of it, in order to make it pay, when really the benefit of it is the whole complex, not just the casino.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd have a casino in Invercargill.
You'd have one here?
Yeah, be good.
Can't agree with that.
I think it's a very complex algorithm for you to understand exactly what inputs create what outputs in a casino, and who's coming there and what money they're spending and where that money's ending up, and there's a whole lot of very technical information there that we probably don't know. But at the end of the day, I think when you're a big city, if you think you're the mayor of a big city or you're in control of a big city, one of the things you need is something like that that's going to pull people in internationally, going to give them something, a conference centre where they can come and be comfortable and do all those things. And if you think of it like that, of people coming in from outside, it really is like exporting. We're bringing in that international dollar.
How many casinos have gone broke, Bill?
I wouldn't think there'd be very many.
I don't know of any.
I can't recall any of them going broke.
That means they are commercially a viable concern. They generate
But where does the dollar go?
But the tax takes a big chunk. They got a big chunk. The people who run the casino, the people...
The employment.
And this may come as a surprise, but people do win at casinos and take money away, So there's locked down as to what percentage of people must take money away, what tax, and what part the owner gets. It's very clear cut in law. It's not random, as you may think.
Actually, if there's anything good about the casino as a gambling institution, it is that, and that they, I think, probably handle those affairs extremely well. Unlike some sports clubs and various entities who had one-armed bandits, and tracing the money to various charities has proved difficult, and we've seen numerous cases in the paper.
The regulations around the casino are extremely tight. Yeah. They run to the letter of the law, and they're traceable, as you say, in those more casual environments. Yep. There's less control, but it's very stringent. Dunedin, for instance, have got very strict rules about how everyone plays games and everything, and they conform to them to the letter.
Does any of that money go to lotteries? Is that
I don't
part of
know.
lotteries?
I don't know
No.
whether that tax money ends up in the lotteries hole or not. But
Interesting.
there's a tax cut of some significant portion. Government
So this-
enjoys
Well,
them.
no wonder the government's keen on it.
Well, absolutely.
Well,
On that
as far as
somewhat happy note of the government getting more tax, happy or unhappy? Well, it's not from me. We're going to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be back. Plenty more to talk about. Welcome back to Newsroom. On the panel tonight, Tom Conroy and Carolyn Dean. Now, we've been talking about local things. One more local thing we need to talk about is the fruit fly. And I don't know if you've been following the news on this, but the response to it has been instantaneous from the government, as it must be with this thing. These flies, obviously, by reason of their name, attack fruit and render it unsaleable. And they breed like crazy. Once they get out in an area, particularly in a warm climate like Auckland, if they've got past a certain point of breeding and spreading, then they would be deemed uncontrollable. So we've seen things like increasing numbers of people out chasing it, like they say 80 people involved, 120 people involved, 140 people involved. Then they're saying you might have trouble getting into the country, getting through customs and whatnot, because we're just checking everything so rigorously. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to ask the question, how long is it going to be before we do get overwhelmed by one of these pests? And should we at our borders be so rigorous, that nothing like this could happen? Should we double, should we triple our efforts? Because the disaster that would be caused by these bugs, or a couple of other bugs too, getting into the country, would just be ruinous on our horticultural economy. What do you think, Carolyn? Should we be investing more so that this doesn't happen?
Well, from what I can gather from what was on the news today about it, they found 5 so far.
They
Does
have
that
found 5.
sound like
Another
a
male?
lot? Does this sound another male? Sounds bad.
Depends what the others were.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, we had the news that they have one female and they found 12 larvae. You know, they're all going to they would have all turned into a grub. Those grubs turned into adults, so they hadn't found them.
Yeah. It amazes me that anything can get past what we have already. I've travelled all over the world, and our biosecurity at our Auckland airport is the best
pretty
in
good.
the world.
Still relies a little bit on honesty, doesn't it? Declaration of...
It does.
Because the types of products are not picked up by the dogs necessarily, are they? The fruit that you may have in your bag. You may actually genuinely forget that you had some food in the bag. There might be people who purposely don't say anything. So I think there's only so much they can do. Remember they used to go down the plane and spray?
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah,
They
that's
don't do
right.
that anymore, do they?
They do that, and I landed in Dubai a few years ago,
still do that
and the
somewhere?
whole plane was fumigated
Right.
Yeah, with you in it.
with us in it.
Yeah.
Not because you were in it, but you just
I
happened to be there.
don't know why.
That's right.
Right. Well, it must be an harmless insecticide of some sort. Yeah.
But that's
I
what
don't
they
know,
did
it
it
could
in
have
New
been-
Zealand when you
Yeah.
arrived.
It could have been mind control for all I knew.
Well,
Who knows? You just suddenly start getting fumigated in a plane. It's not a very pleasant
But it
experience.
you
was
wouldn't
common.
know if it was mind control, would you?
You wouldn't
common.
know.
It was common.
Yeah, it was indeed.
But a seemingly impossible task to stop. And they've done very well to date, as you say, not to have had an outbreak, because they do pounce on it very quickly.
They're very incredibly efficient once anything's discovered, and of course the reason they know it's discovered is that they do keep traps, permanently monitored traps around Auckland and whatnot. The only thing that worries me with this situation is the department and the technicians and the scientists who are controlling it do an outstanding job on the funds they've got available. You know, they make the very best use of it. I am just wondering that because we've had a couple of scares lately, whether the government doesn't need to look at this really seriously and say, look, these guys, how much do you need to ensure that we actually can have a completely safe country and boost that? Because there seems to be money available for other things pretty easily.
But what are you going to spend it on? How are you going to...
What they would
throwing
spend-
money at something, but what are you going to do?
They would tell us what that would be. It might be, for example, putting more traps around. It might be having closer inspections. It might be fumigating more containers that come in, more inspections, just basically doubling up on what they do. Like at the moment, they're saying, well, people coming into the country, it's going to be slower because they're obviously doing more inspections. Well, you can speed that up by providing twice as many people to do the inspections, all of those sorts of things, because this industry is just so amazingly valuable to us that we are basically a pest-free country in many respects. We've got some pests here that we don't want, but we're pretty good compared to what there is overseas. Obviously, the Australians and a few others have got the fruit fly.
I thought you were going to say Australians are the best.
Oh, no. They've got
They have arrived for the cricket.
What's that?
They have arrived for the cricket.
Oh,
so
good. Yeah, well,
be...
don't forget to talk about that cricket.
We're going to mention later.
Yeah.
Do you think it came in a container, Bill? Would that be your...
I don't know. It'd be very interesting to hear the analysis of the experts up north, but I guess there's a number of ways. You've got goods and people arriving in the country. And a tiny fruit fly. You know, I'm sitting there thinking, as you said, Tom, how have we kept these things out up till now?
That's right.
How have we kept them out? See, most of our pests have arrived on boats. Rats, they came on boats. You know what I mean? Possums, put here because somebody thought they were furry and lovely. But most of our major pests we've either deliberately brought here or they've come by accident. There's a couple that we don't know about, which it's thought they might have blown over somehow or other from overseas.
Yeah, I'm wondering that too.
Yeah, I was interested to read that it's, and this is not some sort of made-up story. There are some snakes living in New Zealand. Apparently, there's a very small known colony of them somewhere on the west coast. They'll never come to much, you know. You build up your snake colony, and all of a sudden you're hit with 15 inches of west coast rain. It makes it difficult when you're a reptile. Right. But I was interested to read that in the opinion of some scientists saying no, they believe that there are some very, very small colonies of them living, which will never spread. Right. But yeah.
Well, when a container comes on, I just recently had a container come in through my property. And I didn't realise this, but there's quite a lot of coming and going with MAF for the container coming, and they actually come to the property where it's unloaded and inspect as it's being unloaded.
Yes.
So I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, yeah.
But if a fruit fly's got through, then
it's a pretty hard to spot.
Yeah.
The traps are the only way
they have done
amazingly
well. I take my hat off to them, and they just are not giving up.
And stopping people moving the fruit around the city,
obviously
contains it to a certain degree. But
education's a big thing there. Yeah. Right. Let's go. Let's talk about the cricket now. We're going to do that. Like the cricket. How's it going in your mind, Tom? Are things looking good?
It's a fantastic tournament in terms of interest. People are turning up at the matches, whether the New Zealand are playing or not. New Zealand's playing well. That obviously gets interest up there. It's not even a third of the way through the competition yet. They've got
11 games out of 44 so far.
That's right. That's a quarter, isn't it? So roughly. So that's it'll be interesting to see 3/4 of the way through the competition whether it's been maintained, especially if the top 4 of each group becomes more obvious, and then of course there's some meaningless games amongst there that might quell interest a little bit. But I think as long as New Zealand is in the mix, and it looks like they're almost certain to make the quarters at least now, so people will be hanging out for that. And I'm very pleased that they're going along to UAE and Afghanistan games. I think there was a game in Dunedin with 2 of the smaller nations.
To see Afghanistan.
3,000 people turned up, or 2,500 people.
Yeah, and big surprises so far.
Yeah, and enough surprises to keep people interested. Right. And all teams are competitive in their own way. Some less so than others, but no one is getting trounced except England, and we didn't mind that because it was us. So
exactly, they deserved it.
But it's not a minnow getting smashed. It's somebody just had a good day and another team had a bad day. I mean, they're still a good team, England.
And a record set.
And records falling all the day. Yeah, records every day. You watching any? Karen?
I haven't watched any yet, but from what I've heard on the radio and people watching, it's definitely the dynamic levels are right up there, and it's exciting, and it's starting to turn people who have never been interested before.
That's right.
I am interested. I used to play cricket at school, but I just don't. It's the time factor of sort of sitting down and watching. But I'll be watching on Saturday.
Everyone will be watching. There'll be a massive crowd on Saturday. An Australian game. Actually, and I shouldn't say this, but if we lost the game, it probably was not going to have a huge bearing on our progress. But because it's an Australia-New Zealand game, even with or without the World Cup, with 50,000 people there or 40,000.
Probably the World Cup is less relevant in the fact that it's New Zealand versus Australia.
I think that's added to
and the sledging has started
and they're
already.
and they're both playing well.
Yeah, that's right.
The thing I wonder about with these really popular things on television is the demand for electricity at certain points during the game. You know how when everybody gets up to make a cup of tea,
during the break,
all of a sudden there's a spike.
It happens in the newsroom, the advert breaks.
Yeah.
It does.
The amount of brewery closes down. They rush out there and overloads.
And I'm not sure how it works in New Zealand, but I know in England, like at the break of Coronation Street or at the end of Coronation Street,
yeah, there is.
Everybody puts on their jug, and there's actually a man who has to quickly buy units of electricity from France, nuclear-powered energy from France, to make sure that spike is accounted for.
I can assure you in New Zealand, that it's a lot easier to manage.
Oh, okay.
But the nature of our generation means that we have instantaneous generation with the hydro plants. They can start them up for something like that if they want to. They can just have one sitting there, the water is there, they just switch her on and away she goes pretty quickly.
Okay.
Particularly with the computer-controlled sort of synchronous things they have.
That's put my mind at ease.
Yes, it's not like they have to start up a coal-fired power station or anything like that.
Tea time in the game.
That's right, yeah.
We have to have tea.
Well, exactly.
There's so much tea in cricket.
That's right.
What is
well, that's what cricket is about, tea.
Yeah.
So you take the tea out, it's no longer cricket.
Yeah.
Some people are saying, have you been following the Oscars? Did you watch them?
I've watched the highlights.
Did you?
And
What
I've
did you
seen
think?
a bit of bits and pieces.
What about the red carpet? You're a bit of a red carpet fan.
I am, but I think you probably
Bit
got
of glitz.
into it. You probably got in ahead of me. I haven't caught up with it yet. But I definitely know I saw the frocks. I
Right.
saw
Lot of pretty
there were
frocks,
some lovely frocks. The Lady Gaga one, which was just sort of pretty and yet totally bemusing.
Right.
It looked like she was
What
wearing...
else would you expect from her?
I didn't see her. I only saw her singing. It wasn't the one she sang in, was it? The white
No,
one.
different
I
one.
didn't
She
see
had
the
on
first one.
sort
No.
of big red leather gloves that looked
okay.
like you would take, the innards out of a...
X-Men type things. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, something surgical.
Like you would put on for birthing a calf or something
okay.
like
Okay.
that.
That brings it back to Southland.
Yeah. And anyway, no, I heard it was very white. That's the feedback that kind of all the nominees were white, and so
Okay.
there was a lot of
See, I thought
discussion about that. But that's just really about the stories that people are telling, isn't it?
But it shouldn't have been, because there's been years when they had 12 years a slave, and when there was quite a, and the pirate one off the Captain Phillips, there was years where there's a lot of multicultural
about the
representation.
movies.
It's just timing.
Yeah.
Nobody sat there hand-picking white people in the movies, which is what they were implying. I thought they were silly. It's just the way they fall.
Yeah.
The three movies that I've seen that were within that lineup were Boyhood, absolute
Rubbish.
exercise in patience it
Right.
takes.
To watch it.
It's not
Took
bad.
10 years to film.
Yeah,
so.
but if you're a real go-getter with a can-do attitude, I would not sit down to
I
watch
didn't look like
Boyhood.
that to me either. Yep.
The Theory of Everything.
Okay, I've heard
Eddie
it's very good.
Redmayne is amazing as that,
Yes,
as Stephen
yes.
Hawking's just incredible.
It
And
looks like him.
the Imitation Game, which was phenomenal
Okay.
because of the
It was-
story.
It was I agree. I've seen both of those last two, and I thought the Alan Turing story. I thought he should have won the award, and I
Yeah.
tell you why. Because they both were fantastic acting performances. Eddie Redmayne and Stephen Hawking.
Right.
But he's had 50 years of video coverage of Hawking through his time, and met the guy
Yes.
to base it on. Whereas Cumberbatch had to just assume what Turing was like and
Yes.
create a character, and it's exactly what I thought Turing would be like. So that, for me, is good acting.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were both fantastic performances, but on the basis of having nothing to go on, because everything was been a secret. Nobody even knew existed until 10 years ago.
That just blew my mind.
Yeah.
That all of that information
It is a fantastic film.
is now out there that we didn't know, and
Great to watch.
just the implications of if you knew all through that second part of the war, that later part of World War II, if they knew that things were going to happen but they had to allow some of them to
Yeah.
happen, then what else were they knowing and allowing?
And a lot of it, because I've read about, because I saw a documentary after 50 years, of course,
Yes.
things came in, and I'd seen a documentary about it and read about it, and I thought they kept pretty much to the story. They changed a few things. The machine wasn't that big, and it was in banks, and there were a few other minor titivations. But the general story was right, and it's tragic about, not just about the war story, but how he was treated as a human being. If you haven't seen the film, I won't tell you, but it's awful. And it was only in the 60s when they were doing those sort of things to him. So it was
The guy was a genius.
an indictment. And clearly he was,
A
and the
genius.
people that helped him, obviously it wasn't one man band, but the film was, I reckon, the best film of the ones that I've seen.
Okay.
Agreed.
But so
Yeah,
if you're going to get one film,
Birdman,
that's
was it got the best film?
Yes, but I'm always concerned about they've gone down this path of the culty type films.
Okay.
I don't know nobody, because we talk amongst ourselves here about viewing, and they watch a lot of movies between us, and nobody's raving about Birdman yet. I haven't had anyone say you got to go to that movie,
Right.
or Boyhood for that reason, for they're both arty type films, and they're American. But you look at the list of Oscar winners recently, and you have to go wee way back to get a popular movie. Like King's Speech was possibly the last sort of generally popular movie that didn't have some sort of political stance. It was, well, apart from the King, but it was an entertainment movie. And then before that, maybe Slumdog Millionaire. But in between, there's all these little quirky little movies that they seem to they seem to award. So it's not just because we like them, and that's what I thought awards should be about.
Yep.
Isn't it the one? Like, we all love the Imitation Game. Well, why isn't that one?
It's interesting.
But anyway,
of course, there's been talk there about, you know, I was watching a little BBC clip with Will Gompertz, so he pronounce his name, sort of saying that whilst obviously bribery and corruption is out, there's an enormous amount of lobbying goes on at the members of the academy. You know, it could be, it used to be, oh, come to dinner at my place, whatever, so the director's making sure that their films are put in front of them. And he said they try and clamp down as much as they can, but sometimes he said, well, I saw a movie at one of the director's homes, saw the movie, he said, with the actors lurking around in the background. So
serving drinks.
Serving drinks, that's right. So, you know, for these guys, and a producer was saying that. So,
but a couple of things on the ceremony. Those live events are some of the biggest televised events in the world. Yes. Oscars, the Globes, this is why they're all on TV. They're huge audiences, and although they said this one was down, I think partly because it was pretty much determined who was going to win, so you didn't have that sort of what-if factor. I didn't think there was much tension on that. But one thing worth watching is Lady Gaga singing the Sound of Music medley.
Really?
She's in a normal dress.
Have you ever seen it? Look for it.
There's no fancy dress, the plain
so
white dress.
So how was she?
Well, she spent 6 months with a vocal coach to make sure she did it justice, which gets a tick in my box.
She's a professional.
I don't know Lady Gaga music, I know a little bit, but you have to point it out. And so this was a vocal test like she's never had before, and she prepared, and I thought she was saying it beautifully. It was rearranged to suit her voice, and then Julie Andrews came on. It was a nice tribute to a fantastic singer, of course, in her own right. And I thought she did it very tastefully indeed, when really she's known for not being tasteful, in many regards.
Singing live
she's got to change
a
it
lot
up.
more difficult. It's a lot more difficult because you can't
testing piece.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's no enhancement, no computer enhancement of the voice. What did you just say, Carolyn? Sorry.
It's gone.
Oh, you see, so she's got to keep it up.
But the pressure is always on when someone is an iconic singer of that note. Only Julie Andrews can sing it, so it wasn't. She wasn't trying to imitate.
Interesting that she put herself out there. Great risk for Lady Gaga.
Oh, what I was going to say was she's just. You've got to change it up, and being crazy can get boring, and so sometimes you just have to be incredibly professional and conservative.
She might be reinventing herself. I mean, from that, as you say, Tom, a lot of people watched it.
You look at the clever performers like Madonna and Gaga and those who've done the shock value over their time, how they've just tweaked their act. Because they're clever marketing people. They may not have had the most fantastic voices of all time. Madonna quite limited, but got the very best of what she had and changed her image. And 30 years later or 25 years later,
she was a Vita. You can't say this. She's limited.
But they had to rewrite the whole music to suit her voice. And Lloyd Webber, because it was written for people to sing it much higher.
Opera
but
style.
But she did a great job of it because she learned how to sing, and they wrote it to suit her, and it worked out really well.
Yeah, she sang it well.
But so credit to the professionalism of them. I think it's fantastic.
No, she's gone up a couple of notches in my book. It was not a great Lady Gaga fan, but
that was a great tribute, and it was not about her. I didn't think it was about her, which is unlike her.
Which is
it's always about her, isn't it?
A great step forward. Stay with us. We'll be taking some more steps forward after the break. We'll be back with topics of interest and a couple of other things. Welcome back to Newsroom. On the panel today, Carolyn Dean Tom Conroy. Now, one thing, probably the most important news event of the week that we haven't talked about yet is New Zealand is going to be sending troops as trainers to Iraq, Carolyn. How do you feel about this? Are we sending our men to war?
No, not on the sense that they're sending 143 in total, and 16 are trainers, and the rest are basically protecting the trainers.
Right.
Not all of the rest, but most of the rest.
Just a contingent,
so there's a protective force who are watching the backs of these trainers, so they're not literally at war. And these trainers are training Iraqi troops. But the whole thing's sort of quite concerning, I think, because there's no legal agreement in place as to what happens if somebody kills somebody. So you've got people training in a very dangerous place, and then people who are protecting them who may or may not, well, who knows what will happen to them with no legal agreement in place.
They're on diplomatic passports, apparently.
Yeah, but that's
Gives you
not
some protection.
Some protection.
that's not the full quid. So if you on a diplomatic passport shoot up some, a bunch of civilians because they appear to be a threat, what happens then?
Yeah.
So you could, who knows? But that's the most concerning part to me, is that piece is not in place before we have agreed to send troops over. I don't really know the reality, but John Key said every New Zealander is now at risk, and I don't know what to make of that, whether that's an accurate statement or not. I know he's put 20 more people on the terror list.
They're saying everybody's now at risk because we're sending troops, or we're sending troops because everybody's now at risk.
Sending troops because everybody. Yeah, John Key wouldn't say
that's what it is.
Everybody's now at risk, and so we're sending troops.
You have an army for a reason, and that's to protect you in the case of potential attack, correct? That's what an army is
Absolutely.
for. The more preemptive you can be about those strikes, the better off you are. You don't want to wait till they're in your doorstep. You've got to be proactive, and I think that's what the army is there for, and therefore we have to make a contribution for several reasons. One is that if there is possibility of quillage at the source, we should be trying to do so as part of an international contingent, which is obviously what they are. Don't care whether they've got a bit of paper or not, that's what it is. And I think you can't turn around and sit back and do absolutely nothing and then expect, if something does happen, to go and call on Australia and other people to put things and say, by the way, can you help us out? As you need to because of the intelligence, etc. When you sat back and did nothing and they were contributing. So I say that's fine. This is not a in terms of sending people away. I know they'll say, oh, it's not your son, etc. But people join the army knowing that there's a possibility of conflict, and some people do it because they want that international experience of getting on the ground and doing good. That's why they join. They are not a conscript army. So the people are there in the SAS. They're there to be combative. That's what what it is for.
There are people around who say, I feel my task in life is to go out and put my life on the line to protect others.
Correct.
Well, our police do it every day.
Exactly. And so I don't have an issue with that. It was interesting that it didn't go to the vote in the Parliament, which is what?
Well, it would have been deadlocked.
Correct.
Because somebody's gone.
Right. Okay. So, well, it may have been. We don't know exactly where people would have voted at the time.
That's why they said they wouldn't have.
But they don't need to. We voted democratically last year, and we put one party in charge. So we have to accept the I didn't vote for them, as you know, but we have to accept the consequences. Sometimes they make a decision which you've already done the voting. You don't need another vote. That's what you put them in to run the company, make those decisions for you. You had the chance to change that.
A lot of people will be considering the things we've discussed today, and also the fact that when you read about what ISIS is doing, basically just murdering innocent people, women and children.
And we're
everybody
says
says
nothing
something
is going to happen here.
That's
naive.
right.
When you look at Australia and how close they've had to.
Yeah.
I don't know whether the one at the cafe may or may not have been that, but it was promulgated by that.
Oh, it was.
And there's all sorts of things going on behind that they're fixing before before it goes too far.
That's sort of paradoxical though, because we're more of a target for getting involved, so that's a problem. And the second majorly confusing, complicating issue with this particular contingent is that it's highly likely, or it's possible, probable, likely, that the guys you train, the Iraqi troops you train, will turn on you.
It could happen.
There was something like 144 US coalition troops were killed by insider attacks. That's troops that they trained turning on them in Afghanistan.
But does that mean you sit there and do nothing because that might happen?
But does it mean minority? It's more a thinking process. If you're more likely to get killed by these people that you're training, is there a better way of doing it? Because the way that warfare is, in this day and age, they're not going to attack us. They're not going to come on a boat and attack New Zealand, but they're going to do it in all these other retribution kind of ways.
They might draft people in that are already here. You don't know what.
Couldn't we just train them by Skype?
Yeah.
hologram.
Your idea about the cheap pass at Rugby Stadium is much better than the Skype one, all right? Don't think Skype's going to work.
It doesn't
Incredibly
seem a good investment
complex
of
situation, isn't it?
$65 million investment.
I think it's an excellent investment.
Yeah.
I mean, you're paying the army anyway,
Yeah.
Whether they are sitting in Waiouru or they're sitting in Iraq, and they can do more good in Iraq. And as you say, that's what they're there for.
They're,
and they're trained for it.
we don't understand all the issues, but when we read the news and see these, for whatever conflicts we've been involved in before, like in Afghanistan or wherever it was, for whatever conflicts those were, these guys, these ISIS guys, they kind of make Al-Qaeda look like professional, reasonable people. One can't understand where they get their ideas from or how they justify what they're doing. Interestingly, Australia has passed new terrorism laws. They are threatening to take away the citizenship or suspend the citizenship of anybody who's got dual citizenship. They're going to axe welfare payments. This is for those Australians who choose to go and fight on the side of ISIS. And there's been 110 of them apparently go so far.
It's a no-brainer.
It is. I mean, you wonder what's in the minds of these people that want to go over and do that kind of stuff.
You say, one argument is they don't do any good, they're not going to fix it. Well, I said, well, you think over history, there's been terrorist groups for years. Yeah. A lot of them have disappeared, Bader Meinhof and all those others, through force have taken them out of the equation eventually. And this history is littered with those. So it's not quite right to say that that you can't do any good if you let them run right.
Here's a conundrum. Before they knocked off Saddam Hussein, he acted like he froze all of that activity. He was like he just froze everything. And once he got pulled out, Saddam Hussein's bad, we need to take him out. Boom, we take him out. And then all this other activity started up. It was like an unfreezing of all this activity.
What was happening, a lot of evil slaughtering was taking place under his reign, but it didn't affect us, so we didn't care about it. Right. Then suddenly there is an impact on us and we care, but people still died and were slaughtered by him. He was still an evil despot. Just because it was nice and tidy and out of our view didn't make it the right thing to do.
Is it that ISIS is better with communicating? Because they're obviously doing slick videos and everything's getting out over the internet, and maybe it's just that we're seeing it now, whereas in the past we haven't been.
Now we're seeing it.
One of the differences
obliged to do something about it.
Saddam Hussein would never have wanted to have been known for doing that. That it would have been shameful for him. For these guys, it's not shameful. And that's
also pre-social media, so lots of things never got out. If they could block the 2 or 3 main paths, now it's impossible to stop that information spreading about what the evil that's happening.
Yeah.
So now there's more of it, because before we didn't know and it was convenient. I think now you've got an obligation of care to do something about it. And if we're a potential target, as one day you might be, and you have to say you might be.
Exactly.
Got to stand beside Australia sometimes and those other nations, because we might need them. And that's not the only reason. We want to fix it as well.
Exactly.
Did you know that people are changing their business names as people whose businesses are called ISIS, who are now having to change the name of their business?
Well, they would.
That's why the black has disappeared off the flag of proposals for New Zealand. We've got to drop black because they've got it. And I think, oh gee, they've won something there, haven't they? They've won a battle.
Well, apparently, 3 News was saying that ISIS is not the name, because there are people called ISIS, and the name is, it's not banned. But apparently there's a list of banned baby names.
Right.
Did you know that?
Oh, you saw it.
Well, I looked it up.
There's banned horse names too.
I knew that, yeah. You're not allowed to be called Justice, spelled with a Z.
Or Doctor.
You're not allowed to be called Special Constable. You can't have a backslash or any punctuation in your name. You can't be called Honour with a U, which is how I think Daniel Carter's wife gets away with that. You can't be called Queen Victoria, and you can't be called CJ, AJ or MJ.
Unless you abbreviate proper names.
Unless you abbreviate proper names, Or
V8. You can't be called V8.
You say, you can't be called can't be called Queen Victoria.
You can't be called Queen Victoria.
But you can be Queen Latifah.
You probably can't be Queen Elizabeth.
Well, that's not a real name anyway.
No, there's about 70 names on the banned baby list. So
Special Constable. I wouldn't have thought of that one.
Constable.
Yeah.
Special Constable. I suppose it's a title, but yeah, okay. Can you be called Sir?
No, you're not allowed to be called Sir.
Nothing that denotes.
About justice. We've got a few minutes left. You can have a topic of interest.
Okay, my topic of interest was, I can be quite Canadian in Edmonton in Canada,
Yeah.
which is where actually they have massive mall, which is one of the
Brilliant mall. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
it's been mentioned as a potential target. Wouldn't it be sad if something happened to it?
Yeah.
But that's irrelevant. They obviously are quite innovative, and somebody's come up with the idea of making. They've got like railway lines that run into the city.
Yep.
Two of them that are disused, and somebody's come up with the idea of making them into skateways. So they flood it, freeze it, because it's so freezing anyway. It's minus 12 on average, and then people can skate into town.
That's good.
So I think it's really cool, and they have a festival, like a conference every year about ways of making being so cold an asset as opposed to a problem.
No interest to us down here, though.
No.
No, we're not cold enough.
Tom.
Yes.
Go.
Moon conspirators, whatever that word is.
Yes, yeah.
Listen up. More news has come to hand.
No.
Amazingly, Mrs. Neil Armstrong, the widow of the former astronaut, has found conveniently in the bottom of a cupboard, a bag of his, 47 years later, whatever the title is, which happens to have a cine camera, which happens to have some moon footage on it, and some other paraphernalia that he kept.
Wow.
Supposedly. Of course, once again, there's no stars in the pictures.
That's right, absolutely not. No.
And Bill, you might be explaining that to me one day, how I can shoot stars when I aim the camera from Earth, but not from the moon. I never quite get that. But
The
anyway,
difference is there, but anyway, carry on.
you can explain all that one day when we have time. And I thought, how convenient is that? Does anyone remember when he stepped out of the thing, carrying a little handbag with him? I don't think we remember that, do we?
No,
Maybe it was a
Convenient
bum
bit of
bag.
footage. No, it's a little. You can see it on the net. You can have a look at it. It's like a little handbag, and it had all these shackles and things that he obviously stole from NASA because he didn't give them back.
Why not?
Were they fumigated?
Yeah.
And just happened to have a camera with some film
Moon
in it.
bugs.
So the NASA didn't want their camera back. They didn't want the footage.
Yeah.
Because don't forget, they've lost all the other footage apart from the little bit that you see. Surely they wanted the footage out of the camera.
They've lost it.
And he didn't.
I didn't
didn't.
realise that.
Well, that's part of this
Has
theory. Is that
anyone
most of it's
been
gone.
to the moon since then?
Yeah, they
Yes.
did. Yeah, that's fine. It's the first one we're arguing about.
Yeah.
But I just thought if you want to just continue that discussion, there's a.
Well, there you go. Go and
There's an
look it
opening.
up. See what you can find. I've got a few seconds left for my one. Now, the Herald is onto this thing, money and politics. And they've published 900 documents on their website, all containing the release of donations and expenses and returns for candidates for the 2014 general election. They've already uncovered a $125,000 donation, I think, something like that. They said because our crowdsourcing experiment, that the idea is if everybody goes and has a look at their local candidate, there's people out there, you people out there will know more than what is actually in these documents, and they're getting stuff reported back to them. So they're seeing how much information they can get back and pick up on how much money these candidates actually did spend. Right. So I'm going to go and have a look at this and see how it develops, because so far there's been some success. They're only allowed to spend $25,700 each, the candidates, and all donations of over $1,500 cannot be anonymous. And the Herald's point is, I think, that everybody out there knows what they donated, and they can go and have a look and see if it appears.
Well, is the information going to be reliable then? Who's going to do all the checking?
Well,
it's going to be a massive job.
Well, they kind of acknowledge that. They've already put a lot of work into it, and they are no mean institution, the New Zealand Herald. They've even set up a thing where you log in with a username and click on check a document. How interesting. Halfway between elections.
Report back next time.
We will indeed. Thank you for watching us, as always. We love being with you. Look out for us in a fortnight's time. We'll be back.